All right, so we're here with, I guess, a mini cast podcast, because we had some crazy news today. The very first true real errata. So I want to say that and kind of preface it because we've technically had a couple erratas based on misprints. Had a Stitch Surfer that only had one lure pip instead of two. We've had Ursula, the 3-drop Sing Ursula was labeled the wrong, so I think and it needed to be storyboard or vice versa, and a couple little things like that. But this is the first true. Got a problem with a card, got to do something about it. So I'll throw it over to you first, Prashant, because I know you're new to TCGs.
Yeah.
You played a lot of Marvel Snap, where we errata cards. We changed the wording on cards a lot. But as far as this, like, what are your thoughts when you heard that cards are changing just as a kind of a new person to TCGs in general? Again, I know you've played some stuff in the past, but like...
So when you talk about that, I'm like, how do you change a card, right? Like...
Yeah.
Do you reprint it? Do you, like you did, you put stickers on top? Like, how do you do this? Like, how do you get the message across to everybody at the same time that's playing this game? Or even the people that were playing like Pixelborn, you have to like switch all of them out. And then, well, not Pixelborn, but whatever they're playing now, since they're printing off the cards and then you're switching them out.
So Discord matches and things.
Right. So it's like, okay, like how does this work? And especially since we have all these championships coming up too, it affects so much that's going on. And then it's weird because like you're saying, and like Marvel Snap, you nerf cards around the real problem before you nerf the actual card. So just clipping off this card, changing it in general is just crazy. Like I've personally never seen it before, especially something physical. So it's like, okay.
Really rare. It's a thing that companies want to avoid, which is also why I'm surprised the Ravensburger is doing this, because the biggest problem you can foresee with it is imagine you go to a shop, you have a kid there that's like 10 years old playing the deck for the first time, and then they play a card, they play the Bucky on turn 2, and then someone who's a bit older has to be like, well, no, that's not how that one works. They changed the card. And having to explain that to someone who's new to the game or not as familiar is a nightmare scenario of saying, well, what do you mean? It says this is what it does. It's a 2-cost. It has ward. No, not anymore. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a card game that does it a lot. Well, I guess not a lot. They used to do it a lot more. Goyo Guardian was the last one I could think of that was actually an impactful one that made a card that was very good. It was banned to not being good at all and then back in play. But yeah, like it's not something that's really feasible. And I like how you mentioned, like, are they going to reprint it? In this case, they already said yes. Yeah. But in a lot of cases, sometimes they're like, we'll eventually give you the new card. Right. But for the most part, you're going to have the old version. And it's, I would rather than ban a card at that point. I don't like erratas. I think if you make a mistake and you have a problem with paper, just say, hey, this is our first ban. Sorry, Bucky's banned once set 5 comes out.
Yeah, I don't understand why they don't just ban the card and then reprint it in like a next set with new wording.
I'm a huge fan of spiritual successors. I love it when they make mistakes of a card and then like a year or two later you see a reprint, a functional reprint. It's a brand new different card, but it's like a lot of similarities from the old version that's like updated to be a bit more fair. And you're like, oh,
gotcha.
That's that card, but it actually is fair and not broken and not bannable.
And I think the hard part here is like with the print runs and with them designing cards with any game, the problem is they can't just be like, all right, well, this Bucky's a mess up. We're going to ban this one. And then, set 5, we've got a new Bucky coming that we've designed specifically to be the replacement, like we saw with the words. But yeah, just to reiterate, the change they did was they upgraded or they upped the cost. So from a 2 to a 3, it's still inkable. We took off ward, and it only triggers when you shift a Floodborn into. This definitely just changes the current Bucky deck because you have cards like Aladdin, Flynn, Beast that were coming down triggering Bucky, and at this point, unless we add something like Morph to the deck, they're not shifting. So it's definitely a big change, and I'm 100% on the page with guys, especially Brad. Like coming from Magic just bans cards. like they've started to try some errata stuff with Arena, where they can change the cards.
That's with a whole different format though.
Right.
That's called Alchemy, which is a format only for Arena. Alchemy and then some historic cards from Alchemy or historic legal. It's a weird thing, but the point is it's a digital exclusive format where these cards are made for digital formats to be changed. They will never have paper versions of these cards. Right. So that's different. That's fine to balance because essentially that is Marvel Snap. That is Hearthstone. Yeah. But yeah, because they did companions though.
Yeah. Well, but they did. I guess yes. Technically,
that's an errata.
The companion mechanic in general changed, but essentially, I'm in that same boat though. It's really confusing to players. To also point out these changes, specifically this change, will not go into effect until August 9th. So this is before the DLC that's going to happen around that time. It is before technically Step 5 is available at the big box stores and is legal, but it is at that time when this is going to go into effect. So this is not going to affect your championships. You can still play the normal 2-drop Bucky, so your championships, but it is something to just keep in mind because I agree with you. I think it's very annoying, but my worry is less about the brand new player having Bucky and playing Bucky. My worry is 6 months from now, somebody entering some smaller tournament and purposely misplaying Bucky. Ooh, so being like, oh, I didn't know, and I played this 2-drop Bucky, and the other player, it's been 6 months, it's been a year, they've forgotten that the card has changed. And they're still playing those old copies. Yes, they are going to print some new copies, but they did say in that tweet they're not going to be in packs, so they're still figuring out how to get them to people.
And then also too, like there might be new cards and like the new sets that work well with that Bucky too. So if someone's playing the old Bucky with the new cards that are pretty great, then they could just overtake.
I think that's why this happened, the errata, because I think this was like a future-proofing thing. The first thing you said when we found out about it today, you're like, well, people already just started figuring out how to beat Bucky and how to really play against it. So you were disappointed from that point of view of like, well, the meta's evolving around this card and figuring out how to do it. But I think that might be the whole reason Ravensburger is saying, okay, we need to do this now because the meta is moving around Bucky. It is a meta-defining card. It is a thing where it's not a matter of a rock, paper, scissors format of like, because we talked about this before. Why is red, purple such a good deck, right? Because it's good against the other 3 top decks, being Bucky, and then the other 2 control decks, right? The only reason that's the case, though, is because of Bucky existing. If Bucky was not in these decks, I don't think those 2 control decks would be considered the number 1 top decks because Bucky keeps a lot of other fair strategies out of the meta. That could potentially feast against control that would completely change the entire balance of how the meta is. So from Ravensburger's perspective, they're probably going like, well, hey, this is a pillar of a format that we don't want to be a pillar. So let's get rid of it now. We have cards. We're working on set 9 right now as far as our design goes. And sets 6 through 8, we already know there's a few Floodborns we're a little worried about. We're like, okay, let's do this now. I think that's probably their thinking.
And again, I think the cleaner way they should have done it is just ban. They should have just been like, Bucky's too strong. We're gonna ban him. Sorry. Luckily, he's a 8-cent card, so you're not upset that you're $100 card. Like yes, people could say, well, I bought my Robin Hoods and my Beast, but they're still good cards.
Yeah, you're not playing Diablo because of Bucky. It's great. It's a great card for the Bucky deck, and it was a reason. If anything, Diablo is such a good card that it's what pushed people to run the Bucky version in the first place. It's still going to be good in the normal version that we saw in set 3.
So it's an interesting thing as we look at it. Again, these changes to Bucky, they kind of went, to me, they were heavy-handed with it. And that's why I feel like if you're going to make 3 different changes to a card, you're literally turning into a different card. You might as well just ban it.
I agree. If anything, that's more confusing than banning it. Banning it, like if I tell someone that's new, or in your case, 6 months from now, oh, you can't play the cards banned. That's way easier to explain, quick, short, than being like,
Bucky's the only one on it. Please go.
Really, that's not a 2-drop, it's a 3-drop. Also, it doesn't have ward. Oh, by the way, it only triggers when you shift something. That's It's just
It's a
too
lot.
much. Yeah.
And kind of going to the point you made about like people finally figuring out how to beat it. We've seen red purple really make a resurgence at the last DLC. Both final decks were red purple. Even took down a Bucky deck to get there.
Yep.
We're seeing people bring out blue steel, so sapphire steel, to fight against it. We're starting to see Steel Song come back a little bit. So again, being able to turn to a grab your swords is pretty good against a Bucky.
Well, that deck in general, it's all 1/2s and 1/1s.
Yeah. So I am a little worried because Bucky did keep red blue, so ruby sapphire in check a lot, and so I am a little worried. Eventually, Bucky coming out. That deck was pretty oppressive in general. So now that deck's going to come back, and you're going to have to worry about turn 4 or 5. Be prepared. You have to worry about the control that they have with Medusa and other cards like that. Making a huge resurgence in the top deck. So yeah, we'll have to see what kind of shakes out there. But the last thing I kind of want to hint on and talk about a little bit is we've seen our first change, right? So we know all about these communities. Now that people know it's an option to get a card changed or banned or whatever, I have a real big concern with this coming so early to Lorcana. And again, I know, Brad, we discussed this a little bit of like, once you make this first thing, you're opening the door to every annoying card. Oh, I hate Medusa. Medusa kills every card here. It should be 2, not 3. Like, so like now we're getting into the world that if we look at every set, there was always an annoying deck. There was always an annoying card. And I mean, I saw M. Fox being brought up on Facebook of like, that card needs to be changed. Maybe a 3/3 instead of a 4/3. Like,
I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. What I'm hoping that the feedback the Ravensburger gets for the most part. And remember, when these DLCs occur, when there's Ravensburger staff there on hand at these bigger events, they have said, at least they did with us in Atlanta, hey, if you have any feedback for us, please come up to us in between rounds or whenever you see us free and you want to talk. Give us your feedback on how you feel about this, because this is our first of doing these big events. We want to make sure they're good. I would give feedback of like, hey, let's not errata stuff, please, unless it's so importantly necessary to do so. And to your point, again, if you're going to errata to the point of changing 3 aspects of a card, you should just ban it.
Yeah.
I hope that they take that feedback, and that's feedback that's given. So please, if you're watching, give that feedback. And yeah, I don't want to see erratas. I hope this is the first and only errata in all of Lorcana's history, and I mean that wholeheartedly. I want 0 more erratas. I think they're bad for games and TCGs.
So I expect to probably see another 1 or 2 over its lifetime.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping, like, I'm on the same page as you. I really hope we don't see the next one until like set 7 or 8. And even then, I don't want it that early, but I'm just saying, like, it doesn't need to be any sooner than that. Or we will get into the snap world of every 2 months every month we change something because somebody's complaining. Because I really do think the game itself, out of all the decks we played, out of all the cards we played, sure, there's annoying cards, sure, there's really good decks, but I have never really felt like there has been a one card that needed something. Now, I do think Bucky has been the first card that I've looked at and said, that shouldn't have been Ward. That maybe should have been evasive,
for sure,
or whatever. Because I think if he could have been targeted, Bucky would have never been a problem. Because you have grab your swords, you have fire the cannons, you have all kaboom, brawl. You have all these cards that could have killed it or banished it. But
there were people that were like, what are they saying? Oh, the King's Triton is actually good against Bucky. I'm like, please don't run this card. That's so bad. Do not run this card.
Yeah.
When that's the conversation, then it's a card that's a bit too pushed. And again, I agree. Ward being, just the hex proof of Lorcana.
Yeah.
There's a reason that WotC over in for MTG just doesn't put hexproof on cards anymore.
Yeah.
That they've replaced it with, funnily enough, Ward. But Ward now for them is there's a condition to meet.
Yeah.
It's Ward, this cost. You need to discard a card to be able to target it. I would love to see Lorcana just straight up steal that mechanic.
Or pay 2 extra or whatever.
Exactly. Something that is, there's a condition to meet, but the point is it's a meetable condition in some way, shape, or form where you can still deal with the card.
Yeah. and again, they clearly said the reason why they did was it was an unfun situation. People were complaining, saying the game is not fun when they Bucky on 2, they shift Diablo on 2, so you're discarding. Turn 3, they're playing another Floodborn, Aladdin or whatever. They're making you discard again. So now your whole game plan, what you've mulliganed for, and all of that has truly, been disrupted because of so much discard so quickly. And they're building a board while they're doing it. So like, I totally get that. Like I said before, though, people have now started to find avenues to protect against that, which is kind of the shame where like he's been dominant for a month and a half, but now we finally got the pros out there going, okay, I've got a way to beat it. And the only time we get to see that is at DLCs, which is once a month. Right. So it is one of those things where some of these pros figured this out a month ago, but they haven't shared it until they got to the DLC to play with it. So.
I would argue, though, that I do think that that's still maybe an unhealthy aspect of the game. Just because there's a way to beat a card. And I've fallen victim to this in the past of being like, yeah, you can beat it. Just do the X, Y, and Z. Just play these cards. And then you kind of take a step back and look at like, well, why am I playing this card? Would I play this card any other meta? Probably not. Like the King's Trident situation, right? The bad card. Why? Or like you look at like Magic, Hogak, everyone's main decking ley lines, and it's like, that's not good for the game.
Yeah. So and that's where I think like, hopefully, and this is my advice to Ravensburger, is hopefully when they look at these cards, they'll figure out what is the true problem of the card. Again, when I looked at Bucky, when we started playing Bucky last set with Prince John and all of that, before we had Diablo, it was still a great card. And the issue was Ward. That you couldn't target him. Literally, you have to get to 5 mana for Grab Your Swords. You have to get to 7 for Be Prepared. And it was just too much to handle. But Ward's there. You're good to go if it's evasive instead of Ward. But again, I think that was truly the problem with Bucky. Yes, discarding early, Diablo made it a little worse because you can discard quickly with it. Now you do have to get rid of one of your good spells potentially in your deck to be able to shift that Diablo early. But yeah, I don't know. I'm really, really excited to see what the meta looks like come August 9th with the new set and Bucky coming out of here. And if you guys are watching, we're going to be playing some games. So make sure to check the other channel, the main channel, for some decks with the changed Bucky. So we're going to be playing some decks against it and seeing how it goes.
Putting it through the gauntlet.
Yeah. See if it's still good.
Yeah. Any closing thoughts from you guys? Just Bucky in general.
Hope Bucky is the only one, right? Yeah. Like you don't want to see cards changed, like especially so like. Is it soon? Would you guys say it's soon? Too soon or too late? Or
like too soon, like to have the errata in the first place? Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
If the game hasn't been out for a full year yet, that's insane to me. I never would have thought this would happen.
Okay.
And I think, again, like we talked about, I think it sets a scary precedent that people might complain about or use that as a way to complain. Point at X, Y, and Z card, like please make another errata. I just don't think they're good for games. Any TC.
Yeah. Again, would have expected the ban over an errata.
Right.
We'll see what they do in the future. I do foresee at some point there being some ban. Again, that's kind of a given with TCG and the competitive aspect of it. But honestly, if I look at every card out there, I really don't think anything needs a ban at this point with Bucky.
Yeah,
falling on the sword for everything else.
But hey, maybe we go back to complain about a whole new world. And
it'll be a whole new world of turn 2, a whole new world, and everybody's upset because they kept their 7. They don't get to keep their 7.
Oh, true. It's unfun. It's just like Bucky. Yeah.
But appreciate you guys. Make sure if you haven't, leave a comment down below. What do you think about Bucky? Are you happy with it? Do you think it should have been different? And make sure to like, subscribe.